Section 16 of the National Geographic Magazine, Volume 4. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Mother Maps of the United States by Henry Gannett, Part 2. State Surveys. New Hampshire. This state supported recently a geologic survey which undertook the preparation of a topographic map, a work which was effected mainly, however, by compilation, little original work being done. A number of positions in the state were obtained from the United States Coast and Geodetic Survey, and to these were fitted traverses of roads which had previously been surveyed by private enterprise. Upon this skeleton, a somewhat pretentious contour map was produced by using for heights the profiles of the railroads of the state, supplemented by numerous aneroid measurements made by the Geologic Survey. This map was printed on a scale of 2.5 miles to an inch, with a contour interval of 100 feet. It was issued in 1878. New York. From 1877 to 1884, the state of New York maintained a survey under Mr. J.T. Gardiner. By this survey, much triangulation of a high degree of accuracy was carried on, but no topographic work was executed. This state also maintained for many years an organization known as the Adirondack Survey, which was instituted for the purpose of mapping the Adirondack region. No results, however, have been published beyond the positions of a few geodetic points and a large number of measurements of altitude. Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, considerable money has been expended in topographic surveys for special purposes, but these have been on so large a scale and are so detailed in character that, aerially, they are of slight importance. Most of them are on the scale of 1,600 feet to an inch, in contours 10 or 20 feet apart. Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, some work was done in the southwestern part of the state by the State Geologic Survey. This work was based on the triangulation of the United States Coast and Geodetic Survey. The land office plats were utilized, and the relief was expressed by 50-foot contours. Minnesota. Most of the area of Minnesota has been mapped by the State Geologic Survey on a scale of 4 miles to an inch, in 50-foot contours. The horizontal element of this map was furnished by the surveys of the General Land Office, the vertical element being supplied from the profiles of railroads, supplemented by aneroid measurements. Kentucky. Drainage maps of many of the counties of Kentucky have been prepared from traverses of the roads. These maps, which make no attempt to show the relief, are published on a scale of 2 miles to an inch. California. Between 1860 and 1870, the state of California maintained a geologic survey, which, like all other well-regulated geologic surveys, found it necessary to devote much of its means to making topographic maps. By this organization, a large part of Central California was mapped, the greater part being on a scale of 6 miles to an inch, while a small area about the Bay of San Francisco was on a scale of 2 miles to an inch, the relief in both series of maps being expressed by hachures. New Jersey. The only state which thus far has devised and put into operation a reasonable and economical plan for mapping its area is New Jersey. In 1877, this state commenced surveys for a map in connection with its geologic survey upon a plan and by methods very similar to those subsequently adopted in the Geologic Survey of the United States. The work was controlled by triangulation, in the main executed by the United States Coast and Geodetic Survey, and supplemented by the State Survey. Minor control was furnished by means of traverse lines, and elevations were measured by spirit level and vertical angles. The resulting maps were published on a scale of 1 mile to an inch, in contours of 10 and 20 feet. When the state was about half surveyed, the United States Geological Survey undertook and carried the work through to completion, upon the same plan and by the same methods which the state had originated. Private surveys. In consequence of the neglect of the government in the matter of mapping this country, a wide field has been left open for private enterprise, and this field has been worked actively, but with curious results. Maps have been produced by private parties of practically every county in the northern states, and of some counties in the southern states. The material for these maps has been obtained by traverse surveys along the roads. These maps are generically similar, and can be characterized in a very few words. They are essentially diagrams of roads. The houses along the roads are generally represented, together with the names of the owners, as it is found that this aids in the sale of the maps. Streams are but feebly represented, and relief is rarely shown. Most of the railroads of the country have prepared maps of their lines showing at least the alignment of the road and in many cases the adjacent topography. They have prepared also profiles of their lines, and as this is an important element from the railroad point of view, much more attention has been given to this than to alignment. There is one railroad company which has done more than this. The Northern Pacific Railroad organized in 1882 and supported for 3 years a survey of the country adjacent to its line. During these 3 years, an area of 43,000 square miles was mapped in Montana and Washington. The methods used were similar to those of the Hayden survey, and the maps were designed for publication on a scale of 4 miles to an inch in 200-foot contours. A part of this area has been published by the United States Geological Survey. Large areas of the eastern and most densely settled portion of the country are dependent entirely for their maps upon these road diagrams of counties and upon railroad maps and profiles. Such is the condition of all in which no public land surveys have been carried on, excepting the areas surveyed by the organizations above described. Thus, New York has no other maps besides these road diagrams, excepting some 2,000 square miles mapped by the United States Geological Survey, and some trifling additions by the United States Coast and Geodetic Survey, while Pennsylvania is almost as poor in information regarding its topography. The foregoing is a summary of the principal sources of geographic information concerning this country. It comprises practically all the material which is available for the compilation of a map of the United States. Of course, it is understood that in numerous cases the same area has been mapped by 2 or more organizations, thus affording opportunity for selection between them. In such cases, generally speaking, the later survey is the better, but in certain cases one piece of work is better for one purpose and another for another purpose, one for one class of features, another for another class. Relative values of the maps. I propose to classify the body of diversified material in accordance with my estimate of its map value, as expressed by the scale upon which it is worthy of being represented, and thus to make an estimate of the area of the country which can be mapped from existing material upon each of several different scales. The scales which I shall consider are 1, 2, 4, 8, and 16 miles to an inch. I exclude from consideration, for the present, the territory of Alaska. On a scale of 1 mile to an inch, I find that only 100,000 square miles can be mapped, or about 1/30th of the area of the country, that area being a trifle over 3 million square miles. This area possible to map includes the states of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and New Jersey, and parts of numerous other states, mainly in the north. It includes a narrow strip of topography along the sea and lake coasts and the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. 2/3 of this area is the work of the United States Geological Survey, the balance being mainly that of the United States Coast and Geodetic Survey. On the scale of 2 miles to 1 inch, an area of 360,000 square miles has been surveyed by the Geological Survey. No work adapted to representation upon that scale has ever been surveyed by other organizations. This area is widely scattered over the country. On this scale, therefore, an area of 460,000 square miles, or between 1/5 and 1/6 of the area of the country, can be mapped. On a scale of 4 miles to 1 inch, the work of several organizations is included, viz., the exploration of the 40th parallel, the Hayden, Powell, and Northern Transcontinental surveys, the Black Hills Survey, the 4-mile work of the Wheeler Survey, and the 4-mile work of the United States Geological Survey. The work of these organizations foots up, after deducting the overlapping areas, 460,000 square miles. All this area is in the Cordilleran region. The area in the United States which can be mapped on a scale of 4 miles to 1 inch is, therefore, 920,000 square miles, or between 1/3 and 1/4 of the area of the country. The original maps of this area are all of such character as to furnish material for representing all the 3 elements of a topographic map: the hydrography, the culture, and the relief. They include most of those parts of the country which present high relief, including the southern Appalachians and most of the Cordilleran region. With the exception of 60,000 square miles furnished by the Wheeler Survey, the relief of this area can be expressed quantitatively by contours. The additional material, which is adapted for smaller scales than those mentioned above, shows, in the main, only hydrography and culture. Except for certain comparatively small areas, relief is not expressed at all. Still, the fact should not be overlooked that by far the greater proportion of the areas of high relief have been mapped upon the larger scales. In the remaining areas, the relief element is not of so great importance. On the scale of 8 miles to 1 inch, 1,530,000 square miles in addition to the areas above enumerated, can be mapped. Of this area, 1,200,000 square miles are furnished by the maps of the General Land Office, and 100,000 square miles by county maps of the New England states, both of which classes of maps show no relief. 100,000 square miles are included from the 8-mile work of the Wheeler Survey, which shows relief by hachures. The remainder comes in small areas from various sources. On this scale, therefore, a map including 2,450,000 square miles, or nearly 5/6 of the country, can be prepared, showing hydrography and culture. A reduction of the scale to 16 miles to 1 inch, or about 1 to 1 million, increases but little the area possible to map. It adds only such parts of the southeastern states as are not already included, a portion of Texas, and some trifling areas in the Cordilleran region. The southeastern states can be represented on this scale by the aid of compilations of railroad maps, war maps, etc., notably the compilations made by the United States Coast and Geodetic Survey during the Civil War, the compilation of North Carolina made by Professor W.C. Kerr, and others. A compilation from railroad surveys has been made of Texas, which, excepting for the western part of the state, will answer for this scale. In the Cordilleran region, some small areas not included in later maps have been run over so closely by Army expeditions and exploring parties as to be worthy of a place in this category. Altogether, an area of about 2,800,000 square miles can be mapped on this scale. This leaves, besides Alaska, about 225,000 square miles, which is too little known to be represented on a scale of 16 miles to 1 inch. Much of this material is measurably deficient in the culture element, inasmuch as the surveys were executed many years ago, and, in the interval which has elapsed, this element has changed greatly. This is particularly the case in the West, where most of the present stage of development has been produced since the work of the Hayden, Wheeler, King, and Powell surveys was done. To bring this culture element up to date on maps of the two last mentioned scales, viz. 8 and 16 miles to 1 inch, the postal route maps are of great service, are indeed well nigh invaluable. Summary. About 76% of the area of the United States, exclusive of Alaska, has been surveyed by the general government on various scales, and fully 16% more has been surveyed by other organizations or private parties in such manner as to yield useful maps, leaving barely 8% of our territory unsurveyed. The mother maps of the country are based upon these surveys. The areas represented on the various mother maps of the United States and available for compilation, classified by the scales on which they are worthy of reproduction, are summarized in the appended table. They are also shown graphically in the accompanying map of the United States, forming Plate 17. The scale of 1 to 1 million, or nearly 16 miles to 1 inch, has been adopted by the Geographic Congress for mapping the Earth, and it is therefore of interest to know how much of this country can be mapped on this scale, and where the areas are located concerning which our information is too scanty to warrant such representation. These areas may briefly be enumerated. They are northern Maine, Adirondack Plateau of New York, southern Florida, most of Idaho and much of Montana, the Cascade and Coast ranges of Oregon and Washington, western North Dakota and South Dakota, western Texas, and southeastern New Mexico. Table. Areas represented on the various mother maps of the United States and available for compilation on certain selected scales. On a scale of 1 mile to 1 inch. Area in square miles surveyed by the Coast and Geodetic Survey, 34,000. By the Geological Survey, 66,000. Total area on scale, 100,000. Total available for scale, 100,000. Remarks, all in contours. On a scale of 2 miles to 1 inch. Area in square miles surveyed by the Geological Survey, 360,000. Total area on scale, 360,000. Total available for scale, 460,000. Remarks, all in contours. On a scale of 4 miles to 1 inch. Area in square miles surveyed by the Geological Survey, 120,000. By the Powell Survey, 67,000. By the Hayden Survey, 86,000. By the Northern Transcontinental Survey, 40,000. By the King Survey, 87,000. By the Wheeler Survey, 60,000. Total area on scale, 460,000. Total available for scale, 920,000. Remarks, all but 60,000 in contours. on a scale of 8 miles to 1 inch. Area in square miles surveyed by the Wheeler Survey, 100,000. By the Land Office surveys, 1,200,000. By private surveys, 100,000. By miscellaneous surveys, 30,000. Total area on scale, 1,530,000. Total available for scale, 2,450,000. Remarks: 860,000 in contours, 160,000 in hachures. Remainder show no relief. On a scale of 16 miles to 1 inch. Area in square miles surveyed by miscellaneous surveys, 350,000. Total area on scale, 350,000. Total available for scale, 2,800,000. Remarks: same as those for the 8-mile scale. The territory of Alaska is still in the exploration stage. Its condition, as regards our geographic knowledge of its area, is quite similar to that of the Cordilleran region half a century ago. The shoreline has been explored and laid down upon charts in its approximate position, and a part of the intricate shoreline of southeastern Alaska has been mapped with some accuracy. The interior of the territory has been traversed by a number of expeditions, and thus a few routes have been surveyed, but far the greater part of the interior is still utterly unknown. End of section 16.